Hey everybody, and welcome back to week two. I hope the first week was relatively self-explanatory and that you didn't have any questions. If you do have any questions, again, feel free to contact me. So today we're going to start in talking about golf and tennis resorts, and so this is chapter 6 and 7, and there's a fair amount more golf to it than there is tennis. So let's go ahead and jump right in. So probably the most important thing, trend-wise, to talk about as far as golf resorts is that they're usually part of a housing development. For the most part, we build them in conjunction with planning to build housing for people who want to live on golf courses. And in the not too distant past, we can see here on this table right here that there's been a huge increase in the number of golf courses that were built in America. 2,500 courses in 20 years, approximately. So if we look at, most of those have been in sunny places, places like Florida, California, Texas, Arizona. But Georgia gets in there, and surprisingly enough, so does Michigan, which we don't think of as a sunny place. But most of these represent new residential building, or new residential communities. So this is building a golf course and then building a neighborhood around it. So this represents a lot of new housing. And so again, like, housing is the big part of golf course development. The money is made, a lot of the money is made from the housing. So that's going to be something that we think about when we talk about golf courses today is, well, how does this affect the people that live around the golf course, or selling houses around the golf course? Another thing is that this has probably been overbuilt. So we build a lot of golf courses, and this really kind of goes back to the peak of Tiger Woods. We built a lot of golf courses because we saw an increase in the number of people playing, and then the game sort of leveled out. And so we ended up with more golf courses than we needed. So building a golf course is not cheap. It is a very, very expensive operation. So when we're looking in one of those sunny places like Arizona or Southern California, as much as $100,000 per acre. And water is going to be even more expensive there. Now up in the Northeast, it's down to maybe $4,700 per acre, but it's still an expensive proposition to build a golf course. Um, and then we have to think about, golf courses have an environmental impact, and so it's kind of a balancing act that we're trying to do. So some of the positive things can be, golf courses actually allow water to return to the watershed. By building big open grass areas, they act like sponges and allow, if it rains or when it rains, it allows the water to pass through and go back into the watershed, rather than like washing away topsoil and things like that. Um, they tend to, because of the green spaces, they tend to lower the temperature versus, say, having concrete. They tend to be quiet, but they're also sensitive to noise. People traditionally like their golf courses quiet. They can also serve as fire breaks, especially when we look at places that are prone to wildfires. Having a large open space that doesn't have any, that's made up of grass and water hazards and sand, that is an area that will break a fire. So the fire can't cross that path. So if you're in an area that, like the Southwest California, that has a lot of pinyon or tumbleweeds or things that burn easily and are prone to having wildfires, the golf courses actually have a can serve the purpose of breaking that so that you can stop wildfires, from progressing in certain areas. It's a small benefit to them, and also just having open green spaces. Now, on the negative side of it, you are changing the environment. You're taking what was woods, natural spaces, and sort of engineering them to be what humans like to play the game. Um, so I said, that such as in the Southwest, a golf course costs $100,000 an acre, and you're looking at a property this size, 140 to 180,000. I mean, 140 to 180 acres. That's a lot of space and a lot of money. When you're planning a golf course, you have to think about the shape. You kind of want to work with the natural shape of the environment. You don't want to have to engineer changes in elevation. You don't want to have to engineer hills and hazards and things. As much as possible, you want to work with what's there and build the course around it. You also have to think about access for people who are going to play. So you have to think about roads and how are people going to access the clubhouse. If it's in a housing development, how are people going to get to their houses? So is the course going to cross a road? So those are the sorts of things we also have to think about. The topography, as much as possible, you want it to have some changes in elevation. You want some rolling hills. You want some of it to be flat. As much as possible, again, you want to use the natural environment. And if possible, you would like to at least have the end of the course, the last few holes, play downhill. People tend to be tired and returning to the clubhouse. It's best if they can play downhill, as much as that can be accommodated. Another thing, the natural hazards, if you can use perhaps a swampy area or trees or things that are already occurring, that's a lot cheaper than having to build it, and they tend to be more interesting because of the way they've developed. And then you also have to think about the soil, about where you're playing. So what was the place previously used for? Was it a pasture? Pasture lands often get converted into golf courses. Also things like if you're moving into wetlands, because we like having water hazards near our golf course, wetlands are very, very, very expensive to develop. And you have to have plans in place about how you're not going to change the natural environment. We have to think about issues of drainage, because this is a large open fertilized area of grass and that's frequently watered. So there's going to be water, fertilizer runoff being washed off of the course into the local watershed. So that's another thing that we have to think about. Other important considerations are things like the types of vegetation. So the vegetation, it represents things like hazards. It's also important for noise breaks. It's also important for visual interest. Different types of grass, whether you're in the rough, the fairway, the green, all have different purposes. The amount of effort that's going to be required for clearing. If you're converting a cow pasture into a golf course, that's probably going to be considerably easier than clearing a forest, since the land is probably largely cleared in advance. I've also mentioned that real estate is a big part of golf course planning. So we have to look at the market for how this golf course is going to be used. So if it's an area that is going to be used for second homes, so affluent people are going to have a second house where they want to go play golf, what you're probably going to want to have is a lot of frontage, and frontage is the number of feet or the amount of area where the golf course abuts the home. So these are houses that are on the golf course. So you walk out in your backyard and your backyard touches up to the golf course. People who buy second homes, that's what they're looking for, frontage, being on the golf course. Then that's different if you're intending this to be a resort. People visit resorts because they're there to play golf. And so they tend to be serious golfers. So what they're looking for is the most challenging golf experience they can get. Now, also, if we're building this as a place where we're not going to get a lot of repeat users, visibility is a big concern. Will people be able to understand how the course plays and where they need to place the ball, since they're not, sometimes you're having to play into an area you can't see. Land cost, golf courses are very, very expensive, somewhere between $3 and $10 million on average to build the course, plus another $20 million to build the development. Water supply is another major concern. In the first slide, I told you that the place where so many of the golf courses have been built are in the Sunshine States. So places like Arizona and Southern California, where water supply is a major problem. These are desert areas. I've got a picture that'll come up in a few slide or two where I'll show you a desert course, and it's a beautiful lush green course in the middle of a brown desert. It takes a huge amount of water to maintain that. Oh, here's the picture. So you can see right there is the course in the desert. If you're in the desert, it doesn't matter to the player. They still want the normal lush green texture of the grass to play on, regardless of the fact that naturally it doesn't occur there. So there's a lot of water that goes into it. Right here, we're looking at going to have an irrigation system. They can pump out, I don't know, in the range of 1,600 gallons per minute. Look at the climate where you're going to be. Is it going to be sunny enough, often enough to make money that people be out there able to play? That's the other benefit of having the desert courses is since it's dry, you can pretty much play golf year round. 300 it's 360 plus days a year perhaps. And then golf courses are also expensive to maintain. We're looking at somewhere just things like fertilizer and maintenance of the course, somewhere between $250,000 to $650,000 a year just to maintain. Now that's not upgrading, that's not replacing equipment, that's just maintenance. Now in the desert Southwest, where we have a lot of golf courses, they actually can serve an interesting purpose. They can actually serve to help prevent flash flooding. So I'm going to show you a quick video right here of what's called an arroyo. And these are flash floods in the desert. And that may sound strange that you have a flood in the desert. But what happens is the ground is hard packed and doesn't absorb a lot of water. So when it does rain, the water runs downhill. And so it accumulates and you get in the middle of the desert, you suddenly get what look like large rivers moving very fast of water because it's not being absorbed in the ground. So it's running downhill, and as it accumulates, it actually becomes a lot of water. So you get flash floods. They occur very quickly and can be very destructive. The way the golf course helps prevent this is, whereas normally the land is sun-baked and hard-packed and it can't absorb water, the golf course with the lush vegetation on top, the grass, essentially acts as a sponge. The water hits it and is soaked into the ground. So it actually serves to help prevent some of the flooding. So let me show you the video here real quick. So there you can see it's raining off in the distance. It doesn't look like much here. It's like, oh, here comes a little bit of water. And it's potentially destructive. It's a lot of weight there in that water. It's a lot of force. You can easily, get washed away, get injured, get killed, and people do frequently from flash floods into the desert. So there you go. You got a river in the middle of the desert, and it'll disappear about as quickly as it started. So the golf courses can actually help with flood control. in issues like that because they act as sponges and absorb the water. Um, environmental concerns are always a big deal. A lot of golfers want to play on a course that's environmentally friendly. Um, and certification that you are being environmentally friendly is a good way to go about increasing value of the course. It'll make people who are concerned with environmental issues happier, and also make sure that government agencies that deal with things like water quality are satisfied as well. So now we'll talk about golf course design a little bit. And so there's some different ways of designing golf courses that have different benefits and costs. So we'll talk about some of these different design elements. So one of them is what's called a core design. And so here is a drawing of a golf course that has a core design. And what that means is that the course is designed to minimize the amount of land that's used. And so if we kind of think about it, all the frontage for this is going to be on the outside of the courses. So let's see if I can pull up a pin here. So like we've got, you could build a house here. You could build houses here. You can build houses here, around the edges of the development. In this middle area here, there's no way you could build a house in the middle area here or in here. So the core of the layout is all golf course. Okay, now that's inexpensive to develop because it's the least amount of land. It's the least, and it's also so it's the lowest land consumption. It doesn't take as much space to build this type of course, a core course. The downside is it has the least amount of frontage. You are only able to build houses around the outside edges. So as for a second home development, you're going to get the least amount of return. Flexibility. So how many people can you have play on it at a time? How flexible can you be in use of the facility? It kind of depends. And in the next slide, I'll talk about what I mean about returning nines. But if you can only start on the first hole, this design has a very low capacity and flexibility. Imagine, let's say we open at 7 o'clock. Well, the first people tee off at 7 o'clock, so they go out. At 7:15, let's say there's another tee time, so another party goes out. Then 7:30, another party goes out. And that's as many people as we can put on the course at a time because they're all having to start at the same point on the first hole. The maintenance cost for this is relatively low because it's the least amount of land. Okay, so let's go and look at another type of course. So here we have, and this is not a very good representation, but it's the best I could do, of what's called a single fairway continuous use. Or, single fairway continuous. So here, we could have housing developments built here inside, like this. And outside. And the golf course is, so you would start here, and this is hole 1. Let's see if I can brighten that up so it's easier to see. If this works. This is hole 1 right here. See if purple shows up. This is hole 1, maybe? Yeah. Hole 1, hole 2, hole 3, hole 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, all the way around, and there are houses on both sides. So this, now it consumes a lot of land because you have to have space inside the course, and it's just a big loop. So it's high amount of land consumption, so the development's relatively expensive. It has a huge amount of frontage because on every hole you can get housing maybe on both sides of it. This layout has relatively low flexibility and capacity, again, because everybody starts at the golf course and they play hole 1, hole 2, hole 3 in order. So you can't get as many people on. The maintenance cost is high. Again, huge amount of land consumption. So that's called a single fairway continuous course layout. Now let's go to the next one. Here we have a single fairway returning 9. So what this means is that right here in the middle is where you start. And this is the clubhouse right here in the middle. So when someone comes into play, they're going to start, let's say they're going to start here on hole 1. And then when they've played through, you can, 15 minutes later, you can have someone else can have a tee time and they start there. But not only that, you can start people on the back 9. So while some people are playing right here on the first hole, I can have at the exact same tee time, I can have someone starting on this hole over here. So I can double my capacity. I can have twice as many people playing at the same, or starting at the same time. So I can get more consumption. I can have more people, I can get more flexibility and capacity. I can have more people playing simultaneously, which raises your revenue. It's more efficient. This is a pretty land intensive type of development. But it has some benefits. It has a lot of frontage because I can build houses here and here, all the way around the course. So the single fairway returning 9, the maintenance cost is relatively high, but there's a lot of capacity, a lot of usage, a lot of flexibility, and a lot of frontage. So this is another type of course design. Then we get into what's called a double fairway continuous. The land use on this is relatively low because it's long and narrow. The frontage is pretty good. Lots of places to build houses. On either side of the course. But the flexibility and capacity is low because, again, you're starting, the only place you can start is here. And so when people play, they start and they can play, one party play at the first tee. I can't start anyone at the 9 at the 9th hole because the 9th hole is way down here away from the clubhouse. So they have to play in order. So the flexibility and the capacity is low. And then we have the double fairway returning 9s. So land again, this is pretty good compromise design. We have a lot of frontage where we can build houses on either side of the course. So a lot of real estate development and money to be made here. Pardon me. High flexibility and capacity because here's the clubhouse right here in the middle. So I can start people on the first hole and the 9th hole simultaneously and have twice as many people start at the same time. So good return there. Maintenance cost is kind of a medium maintenance cost because of the layout of the space. We're using a fair amount of land, but pretty efficiently. So those are different types of golf course layout designs that we think about. Then we have hole design, where we're thinking about how people are going to play certain individual holes. And the 3 basic styles are what's called a penal style, a strategic style, or a heroic style. So if we look up on the top right corner, we have what is called a penal style. So that's this one up here, right up here, that I'm coloring on now. If someone is playing this hole, there is one successful way to play this hole. So if you're teeing off from right here, you have to hit the green. If you do anything else, you're going to end up in the water over here. There is one way to play it. If you make a mistake, you're going to suffer. Your score is going to suffer. There's no alternate path. There's no strategy. There's no second way to do it. So this is a penal style, so that if you make a mistake, you are penalized. Another style of hole is what's called a strategic hole. So over here, here's the tee box over here, and here's the green way down here. And on this hole, you have different ways you can play the hole. You could play it, well, I can try and hit closer to the hazards and land here and go for the green in 2. Or I can play out into the middle of the fairway where it's safer and hit the the green in 3. So I can play into the fairway where it's safer and hit the green in 3. So I am more likely to be able to make the safer shot and do it in 3. Or if I'm behind, or if perhaps this style of hole plays into my strengths, I can play it a different way. So there's strategy involved. You have multiple paths, multiple choices to make on how to play. And then the last hole kind of combines aspects of both. So here we have what's called a heroic hole. So we've got the tee box way back here. We've got the green way up here. So I could play it strategically and relatively safe, 3 shots into the thick part of the fairway and on the green. Or maybe I can go for I can play a 3-wood or a driver, play it close to the water hazard, and hit the green in 2. If I make 2 fantastic shots. Whereas the strategic, you're weighing your abilities and choices. Here you're almost playing like you can take the option to play it like it's a penal style hole. And you can go for the really hard shot, but if you make it, you're rewarded. So it's called a heroic hole. So those are, we put different types of holes in there for golfers to challenge them in different ways. The penal style holes are great if you have really advanced players, but for a beginner player or an average player, the penal style hole, not a good choice because you're going to become very frustrated. If you can't play it perfectly, you can't essentially play that hole. So some of the principles of designing a golf course, thinking about the holes. Safety is an issue. I'll show you some reasons why safety is important. Flexibility. Are there different ways to approach it? Shot value. There's supposed to be some par 3 holes, some par 4 holes, some par 5 holes. You want to have the appropriate number of shots in there to make an interesting game. Is it fair? We'll talk about what fairness means. And then is there progression? Does it get are there different levels of difficulty and different types of play that are included in the game? And then we're also looking to balance things like flow of the game. We talked about balance briefly. How expensive is it to maintain? How expensive is it to build? How aesthetics is a big part of golf courses. If you look at how many photographs and photographic studies are of golf courses, a pretty golf course is a very popular golf course usually. And so we're always designing to be attractive. Then there are issues of how does this golf course work for a tournament, depending on what the golf course is going to be used for. So typically the items that are higher on this list are more important than the things that are lower. So let's keep moving. So safety. we put buffers, or we build things into a golf course to try and make them safer. So things like the rough or trees. You look at this picture of a golf course here, there are trees lining on either side. If you look off to the right, you can see that there are what appear to be cars and things, or off to the left, there appear to be cars and things that are parked over there. There would be people over there. So we put trees in the way to prevent those people from being injured by errant balls. The same thing over on the right, there's probably another golf course or not another golf hole over there. So again, an errant ball hit from this tee box could end up hitting someone who's playing on the other hole. So we put trees, all these items in there to try and to try and make it safer so people aren't being hit by errant balls. Now, with that said, about 90% of shots fall within about a 15-degree arc. So most shots fall in a pretty narrow space, so you can design the course to accommodate that space. So some of the things that we can do to make it safer, well, we can raise the tee box so you can see further down the course and see if anyone's on the hole. And if this tee box right here has a periscope on it, so actually that's a way of, you can look further down the fairway and see if someone is over that hill, because they've raised the periscope high enough that you can see over the hill to see if someone's down there that might be hidden by the hill. And usually we also make the right side of the golf course higher, again, to prevent balls from flying over in that direction. So I'll show you a little video here, just concerned about safety. Things, why making the right side of the golf course higher is important, why having trees are important.
Alright, this is Ryan's Braves 2. We are filming for my next short film. We're going to film some scenery shots. Just getting a feel for the area and golf course going here. Alright. Right around the corner we're going to film it. Some golfers doing their thing. Alright. Let's do this. 3, 2, 1, action.
Holy shit!
What
Did you
the
guys
hell
see
was
that?
that?
That is insane.
You okay?
Oh my god! Yeah, no, I didn't even get hit. Oh my god! Look at all this glass.
I'll go back.
Yeah,
I'll go back.
you gotta
go back.
Oh my god!
So again, golf balls move pretty fast, pretty dangerous. So we try and make the course as safe as possible. So issues of flexibility for a course. Can the course accommodate people with different handicaps, different abilities, playing the same course? That for someone who's a very advanced player, a course could be too simple, whereas for that same person who's new to the game, the course may be very difficult. And what you want to do is have a rewarding experience for everyone who might play. Does the course allow for multiple tee positions? Multiple starting points, and can it so commonly the tee positions, just some very rough here, for a novice we're looking at a tee about 140 yards out, intermediate 175, average male or an advanced senior about 210 yards out, 240 yards out for an advanced male, and 270 yards out for a professional, and about 5,000 foot, a course of about 5,000 feet. We want to have the first and the 10th hole larger, because these are going to be the ones where people commonly start from, so they'll kind of gather there. Just some things to think about in designing the space. Shot value, how long it is. The longer the hole is, typically the more strokes it takes to get there, and the larger the target is, the easier it is. So the bigger the green is, the easier it is. If the green is smaller, the par of the hole will be harder. How difficult are the hazards? will also affect the shot value. What's the par for this hole? And one thing to keep in mind is that with 18 holes, a good golf course, you should have to use every club in the bag, so that there is all 18 holes when taken together are going to represent every type of play that a player might have to make. They're going to have to use every tool that they have. Now, fairness. So the rule is that if there's only one way to a hole, and especially if that one single path is clearing a hazard, that is an unfair hole. The idea is that the hazards should allow for recovery. So again, if you think back to the penal hole I showed you a few slides ago, that would be considered an unfair hole. There is only one way to make that shot, and there's no way to recover. If you end up in the water hazard, you're done. Let's see, things like bunkers, the big sandy areas on the golf course, those are hazards. One thing about the bunkers is they tend to be labor intensive, and to be what's considered attractive, the overhanging edges need to be shaggy. So they often actually require being mowed by hand to get the appropriate appearance. It tends to be labor intensive. Let's see. Water is a very punishing hazard. If you hit it in the water, you lose the ball. But on the other hand, a water hazard also speeds up play, because when that ball is lost, you drop a ball and play another one, rather than being caught in the woods or in the rough, where you're having to take many repeated shots to try and get out that may not work. A water hazard is so bad, essentially, that it speeds up play, because you lose the ball and you have to start with another one. You want to avoid having several holes in a row that play in the same direction, so that they're not playing into the wind. One hole that plays in the wind is fine. You don't want several. So you need to change the direction of the way the holes flow. And hazards shouldn't be hidden. So if you have a bunker that is over a hill at the bottom that you can't see when you make the shot, that's particularly unfair. Because there's no way to, you make the best shot you can. You don't anticipate there being a hazard hidden. Progression of the holes. You want to avoid holes that have the same par back to back. So you don't want to say have two par threes or three par threes, just back to back. If you can, you want to have the final couple holes on a downslope, so you're walking downhill going back going back to the clubhouse, because people get tired. And typically you want to build in difficulty up to holes, to the holes at the end. So holes 7, 8, 9, and 16, 17, 18. That's where it gets difficult. That's what you want to build to. The flow is how easily golfers are able to get around the course, and how quickly they're able to get through the course. So things like a really wide fairway with a little rough, so not as much hazard, makes the play faster. Now, another way of looking at faster is easier. That is, people are having to take fewer penalty strokes. They're not getting caught by hazards. They're able to play faster. So speed of play is determined by things like how well it's maintained. So if the course is well maintained, it will play faster. You're not going to have people being caught in divots. You're not going to have people being caught in deep grass. How many hazards there are will determine the speed of play, and then the length of hole. All these things work together to determine how fast people play through the course, what the flow is through the course. So we want to balance the course. So it's roughly equal in length between the front 9 and the back 9. So the same amount of yardage. It has roughly the same par front to back, so it's not like the front is easier and the back is harder. And the difficulty is the same. So again, we want the front and the back 9s to be roughly equal. So a little bit about maintenance here. So when probably the most important thing to keep in mind is that the maintenance costs are going to be driven by the decisions you make in design. So when you design the course, you're designing how much maintenance is going to be required. So things like raised greens, or the size of the green. The bigger the green is, the slower the play is going to be. But it's also going to increase maintenance costs because it's bigger to maintain. How movable is the hole? Basically, we want the greens to be angled about 2 degrees from the back to the front. So this makes it easier to play. It slows down balls when they hit the green. And it also allows for water runoff. And you want to do things like build mounds into the to make the course more interesting. So let's see. So is your golf course pretty? The aesthetics of a golf course. Is it in harmony with nature? So if you look at, go back to the slide where I had the desert golf course, it looks like a desert. You can see the mesas in the background, the red rocks. You can see the cactuses. It looks in harmony with that environment. The same thing, you can have links courses that are on the ocean, and again, they look in harmony. Issues of proportion, and I don't know why I misspelled proportion. Balance, rhythm, emphasis. All these things go into designing a good golf course. Issues about tournaments. So tournament courses tend to be long. So like a men's course, 6,800 yards. That's a huge course. For a women's tournament, 6,000 yards. You need small landing areas. It's going to make that course play slow and difficult to have the small greens, but it's going to make it a challenge for the pros. You need multiple pin positions. You need a large practice area for the pros to be out there and use. You need to think about how often is this going to be used as a tournament space when you're designing it. And you're going to have to think about the needs of spectators, both from a safety and from a practical point of view. So if you have a lot of people watching a tournament, where are they going to park? Where are you going to have, thousands of people, thousands of cars? Where are you going to accommodate them around your golf course? How are people going to be able to move from hole to hole? Where are they going to be able to sit so that they can see the action? You're going to have to provide restrooms, first aid, and locations for TV cameras if this is going to be a televised tournament. So here, this talks about both needs for golfers or for spectators to be able to move, and for them to be safe, and for where you're going to have first aid located. So here I'll show you this video. Ow! Right into the lady. That's kind of smart. So she's over there on the ground being tended to by the first aid people, and blam! Got her again.
First aid. Yeah, they're coming. On the way. They have first aid on the way. So we ask you all to move back over here, please.
So designing a course that's safe so that the spectators aren't being in the way of play, and so that first aid can get to spectators quickly. So all these issues kind of play into, how profitable the course is likely to be, how different it is, how fast it plays, how fair it is, the types of hazards. All these things kind of go into creating a formula for the profitability of a course. Other issues with golf courses. Golf courses and clubs, now we're kind of jumping ahead. The idea of a golf club management, that's part of hospitality, is clubs were private. And so this this is the right to free association. And that's how traditionally most golf courses were in private clubs. Let's see. Now, one thing I want you to read about in the book is what is the definition of private? What makes something private? And what are some of the legal ramifications of that? So I want you to read that in the book. Things we have to think about with golf carts. So, traditionally people walk on golf courses, and a lot of golf courses still have restrictions about use of golf carts, but for the most part, they are just part of the game. The paths should be on the right whenever possible. Um, it should be about 90 feet to the center of the fairway, so it's off far enough that it's safe, but it's near enough that it's not a prohibitive amount of walking. It's closer at the greens and the tees. Typically, the golf paths should be wavy, so they are more aesthetically pleasing. As much as possible, the golf cart paths should not pass across the hole where people are, the area of play. Um, and you need a lot of parking at the greens, at the practice areas, at the tees. If you have a double fairway design course, what you don't want is a two-directional path down the center, because essentially then you have golf carts coming at each other head to head. When you design a course, if you build in hills and mounds, you can hide the paths behind the mounds. And the Americans with Disabilities Act requires that you have a path to exit from the golf path into the fairway at least every 75 yards for someone who is disabled. So a little bit more about golf, just some things to think about. There was a peak in gaming around, or in the play of the game around 2000 with Tiger Woods. And since then, fewer people have been playing. So we're looking at declining participation. It's getting to be more difficult to build courses with things like wetlands preservation and land use restrictions. Water use, water access, water rights are becoming a bigger issue, and since golf courses consume so much water to keep them green, especially in those sunny areas, that's making it more and more difficult to have and operate golf courses. Environmental concerns, things about runoff from the fertilizers that are used, changing the natural environment, all those are large concerns. Barriers to the sport. Well, golf courses tend to be remote. If you don't have good transportation, it can be hard to play the game. It's relatively expensive. You have to have a lot of equipment to play the game. So those are barriers to new people entering the sport. Native grasses. Using the grasses that occur naturally in the area where the course is. Those grasses have usually evolved to work in that environment. So, the grasses that do occur in the Southwest don't take as much water. So designing a course to use native grasses, that's becoming a bigger and bigger issue. Improved maintenance technology, things like computerized mowers, where the mowers go out and mow the course. And you can do that during downtimes where you don't need human beings out there. More golf carts and more women golfers. These are all trends that continue. So tennis courts, where you can have a tennis court is largely determined by the weather, especially for outdoor courts. You need a certain amount of light, and it needs to be pleasant enough to play outside where people enjoy being out playing. Theoretically, an acre of land could accommodate 6 courts, but that's going to be pretty tight, and you're going to have lots of problems with people crossing over into each other's courts, balls being hit into adjacent courts. So that's really too tight. You wouldn't want to go with 6 in an acre. And we designed the courts so that they have dark backgrounds so that players can see the ball more easily. That's why they traditionally have the dark green walls around them. Tennis courts at a private club typically can accommodate 30 to 60 players per court. So if you have, let's say 600 members of your club, you would need between 10 and 20 courts. Now, you can push that capacity a little bit. You can increase it by about a third by adding lights, because then people can play after dark, can play at night. And then if you have a reservation system, you can also push that capacity higher. So instead of people coming and playing when they are available, they set certain times. And if you have certain times set aside, you can schedule more people to use the court more efficiently. Tennis courts tend to be built in groups, and they seem to be most cost efficient when built in groups of around 8 or 10. And always when designing a tennis court, it's important to think about laying out the court so that the players don't have the sun in their eyes. Different types of courts, and it basically falls into two types of categories. We have porous and non-porous. Non-porous, things like concrete, and they have certain advantages. They last a long time. They're easy to maintain. You don't have to do a lot to them. They dry quickly. Now, they do have some downsides. They are very fast play. They're not cushioned, so they're very hard on the legs. They're not comfortable for the players long term. So that it's kind of the downside of the non-porous. For the porous, these are ones that allow water to pass through them. They are fast drying, or they can be. They're expensive though. They require a lot of maintenance, and they usually have to be resurfaced. So the porous type are clay and grass. So clay is a little bit less expensive. They're slow play, but they have high maintenance. Grass is beautiful, but again, requires daily maintenance, and they're relatively delicate. The grass can be damaged. Let's see. Okay, you can read through the changing trends part of golf for yourself, and that's good for chapter 6 and 7. Again, I will be on D2L using the chat function during class time Monday and Wednesday, and if you have any questions, please feel free to email me or ask to set up a Zoom meeting or a call or anything, and I hope everybody is doing well.